Hi everyone, today we're going to be taking a look here at the 2020 Senate forecast here. This is over from the JHK forecast, Senate forecast here. Right now they have Democrats as favored, almost 60% chance to get a Senate majority, Republicans with a 40% chance, and that may look like Democrats are the big favorites here, but they're really not. I mean, it's pretty much, you could say it's almost 50-50. I mean, the Democrats are slightly favored, but not really. Not really by much. 40.7% for the Republicans, that's still quite a pretty good chance in order to get a Senate majority. Like, if you, I guess, if you rolled the dice two times, you would expect one of them to go for the Democrats, one of them to go for the Republicans. So that's kind of where we're at. So it could go either way. Taking a look here, there's a lot of individual races here. Arizona, Colorado look like they are the most favored for for possible Democratic pickups. So we're going to be going over ahead and giving those over to the Democrats, both likely to go for those respective candidates. Michigan, 88% chance the Democrat win. That's actually less than the state of Arizona, but we'll also be going ahead and giving Michigan over to the Democrats, and that shoots them up all the way to 48. So assuming Biden gets elected, and it looks like he's going to be elected, the Democrats only need two out of these possible upsets here. And probably the easiest path for them would be to go ahead and pick off North Carolina and to pick off Maine. Those two Republican incumbents are quite endangered, and then that gets them to a Senate majority at 50 votes. And then even though Montana is looking really close, they can afford to lose that one. Iowa, the Democrats seems to be up, they can afford to lose that one. Alabama looking pretty good for the GOP actually, so let's go ahead and assume they take that one. In South Carolina, the Republican and Democrat, it's relatively close in South Carolina, but there are a lot of undecided voters. So let's assume those break in favor of Lindsey Graham, the incumbent in a typically Republican state. And then you have the two Georgia elections. The normal Georgia election, 71% chance, 67% chance for the special. So let's even assume both of those go for the Republicans. And this is a pretty good map for the GOP. They're holding on to a lot of these endangered incumbents when they're not really expected to. And then if you take a look at some of these kind of races here, this would be the 50-50. So they're saying that there still is quite a lot of uncertainty. And so the most likely situation right now is a 50-50 split, where you have North Carolina and Maine, Arizona, Colorado flipping, and then Montana, Iowa, Georgia special, South Carolina holding, and then an Alabama flip there. And then you need to also take into account that this is a very defensive map for the Republicans. They also need to keep an eye on Alaska as well. They need to keep an eye on Texas as well. They have to keep an eye on Kansas. Also, they need to keep an eye on Mississippi as well. They need to keep an eye on Mitch McConnell in Kentucky. So there's a lot of states here that are looking good for the Republicans now, but they still are going to need to spend money in order to defend those incumbents. And so for that reason, I mean, it's not looking so great for the GOP in terms of their hopes of keeping the Senate majority. Whereas compared to the Democrats, they are pretty much going all on offense, and they're already favored in these two states. They only need to pick out of Maine, North Carolina, South Carolina, both Georgias, Alabama, Mississippi, Texas, Kentucky, Kansas, Iowa, Montana, and Alaska. Out of all of those, most of which favor the GOP, they only need two of them to get a Senate majority. And even if you say, okay, there's an upset in Colorado, let's say, and there's an upset in Michigan, there's still many paths for the Democrats. They could take North Carolina, they can take Maine, and then they only need two more. They could take Jon Ossoff, and they could knock off Lindsey Graham, or they could knock off Alaska, or they could go to Texas, or they could go to Montana, or they could go to Kansas. So there's a lot of possibilities here for the Democrats, and even if you just give them, even if you take away Georgia, they're at 50-50. And a lot of these states that are great, they do favor the Republicans, but maybe by a 2-1 or or 3-5 or 3-2 majority, or 2-1 or 4-5. That still means that out of these, there's probably going to be one or two where the polling was inaccurate, and the Democrats might even be able to pick off, kind of a random. They could pick off an Iowa, they could pick off a Montana, and then they're starting to rack up these seats, and then all of a sudden, it's not looking too good for the Republicans. But let me just clarify one thing, because there had been some speculation maybe Democrats could get to 60 seats filibuster proof. So that could get, if they were to get to 60 seats, that would get them South Carolina, both Georgias, Kentucky, Alabama, Texas would probably be the next easiest, Montana, Kansas, Alaska, and Iowa. That would probably be the easiest path to 60 seats, but that's not likely to take place in the current political climate. Alaska, probably going to go back to the Republicans. Texas, Kansas, Montana, Iowa, Kentucky, Alabama, South Carolina, and the Georgia special elections probably going to maintain with the GOP. But I just wanted to do a bit of a play around there. My current prediction, each individual race, you could see it turning out something like this. In terms of my sort of kind of, I guess, breakthrough of all of these different races, is you've got a lot of races where the Republicans are maybe 2-1 favorites, or 4-1 favorites, or 5-1 favorites, and you could expect a few of those surprises could go to the Democrats. So I would not be surprised at all if you saw the Democrats got to 52 seats on election night. In fact, I'd be more surprised if the Republicans were able to get to 52 compared to the Democrats, because Democrats, at least they've got a path to some of these, 54, 55, and that'll drag the whole thing, whereas Republicans, I mean, it's very difficult to see how they're going to get to 55 seats. They could hold on to North Carolina, that's plausible. Hold on to Maine, that's plausible. Hold on to New Hampshire, take New Hampshire. Even that, I think that's a bit too much of a stretch. They could hold on to Martha McSally, but she's really not looking good. They could probably, next best would probably be to take Michigan and Colorado, but I mean, you're stretching it with places like Colorado, Michigan, Arizona. So I mean, I feel like the top end for the Republicans is probably 52 seats. This is probably the best case for the Republicans, this map. And then the best case for the Democrats, probably up to 54, 55 seats. So that kind of gives you the range there. You can see it here. It's very hard to see a scenario where the Republicans can get up to 56, 57 seats, whereas if you just take a look, for example, 56 seats for the Republicans, 2.5%, whereas 56 seats for the Democrats is 4.3%. So Republicans are favored to go on and win the Senate. But yeah, that's it for today's video, guys. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Good night.